Maintenant, la séance.
I call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 32 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. Pursuant to the motion adopted on November 25th, 2025, the committee is meeting to resume its study on the main estimates 2026-2027, as well as the subject matter of Supplementary Estimate C 2025-2026. Before we begin, I would ask all participants in person to read the guidelines on the updated cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent acoustic incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants in today's meetings, including that of our dear interpreters. Thank you very much.
Honorable. On a un problème de traduction. Donc,
it seems that there's a translation problem. I'll speak French for a little bit. I will keep speaking French. Can everyone hear me? Testing, testing. This is so we are welcoming Deputy Minister Garner. Someone will come see you in a minute. It shouldn't be too long. Is Minister McKnight, can you hear me in the language you've chosen? Yes. Just checking here. We'll do a quick bit of troubleshooting for Ms. Garner.
Non. Toi, c'est en français? OK, parfait. We're just going to make sure that Can everyone hear me in the language of their choice? Est-ce que tout le monde...
Can everyone hear me in the language of their choice? Testing, testing. This is the English channel. This is interpreter speaking on the English channel.
Il faut juste vérifier que tout va bien. Merci.
Just checking that everything is going well.
Technique.
A slight technical issue for people who are listening to us.
So I'll speak in English right now. Mrs. X, can you hear me in the language of your choice? Est-ce que vous pouvez m'entendre dans la langue?
Can you hear me in the language of your choice? Great, thank you very much.
First, allow me to welcome the Honorable Jill McKnight, Minister of Veterans Affairs, who is joining us for the first hour. She is joined by the following officials. Nancy Gardner, Deputy Minister from the Department of Veterans Affairs. Monsieur Pierre Tessier, Assistant Deputy Minister, Chief Financial Officer and Corporate Services. Mrs. Jane X, Acting Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Service Delivery. Mr. Mitch Freeman, Acting Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategic Policy, Planning and Performance Branch. Thank you for taking the time to appear today. We will begin with opening remarks. Minister McKnight, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, colleagues. Thank you for inviting me to provide updates today on some of the work underway at Veterans Affairs Canada.
To strengthen service delivery and reaffirm our commitment to veterans and their families. At its core, our mandate is simple. When a veteran comes forward, the support they are eligible for must be there without any uncertainty. The most recent Supplementary Estimate C reflect this commitment with $300.4 million in additional funding for the 2025-26 fiscal period. Looking ahead, Veterans Affairs Canada is forecasting an $8.2 billion budget for 26-27, an increase of $340 million or 4%. This departmental budget is higher than the opening budget from last year and in alignment with the closing 25-26 fiscal estimates. This government remains focused on improving service delivery. Budget 2025 included investments of more than $184 million over 4 years to stabilize processing capacity for disability benefit applications and build a new path to addressing existing wait times. This investment, combined with the ongoing modernization of VAC's operational processes and IT infrastructure, will ensure veterans can continue to receive timely, responsive, and accessible support. Budget 2025 commits an additional $40.1 million annually to sustain this progress. Even as we align certain benefits and programs to reflect market realities, such as the adjustment in the rate of reimbursement for the Cannabis for Medical Purposes benefit, we are maintaining full access to supports veterans are eligible for. This delivers on our government's commitment to Canadians, investing more, reducing red tape, and protecting access to services and benefits. It's important to be clear. Veterans Affairs Canada is not facing cuts. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We will ensure funds are always available for veterans to receive the benefits and supports to which they are eligible. On aura toujours des fonds
We
disponibles.
will always have funds available for veterans to receive the benefits and the supports for which they are eligible.
Responsibility also extends to remembrance. Next week, we will break ground to start construction of the National Monument to Canada's mission in Afghanistan. Upon completion, this solemn space will offer veterans, Canadian Armed Forces, and Canadians a place to reflect on the service and sacrifice of all those who served in the mission, those who supported from home, and the 158 Canadian soldiers and 7 civilians who gave their lives. Un lieu de mémoire.
A place of memory, a place of respect, a place to remember the 165 lives we will never forget.
In light of this responsibility for remembrance and recognition, along with the Minister of National Defence, I commend the advocacy of colleagues both in the House and in the Senate, championing issues of foundational importance to the Canadian Armed Forces, past, present, and yet to come. Our government welcomes the opportunity to work with parliamentarians on the recognition of service, be it the individual or the mission. We look forward to working collaboratively to maintain this ongoing conversation as the mission or missions evolve. With regards to petition E6661, our government looks forward to tabling a clear, unambiguous response presently. Likewise, as regards S246, the importance of getting this review and assessment process right the first time can't be understated. Current and future veterans need the assurance that a process put in place will speak to concerns for today and tomorrow. For all Canadians, we must ensure that commemoration, commendation, and ultimately recognition of Canada's women and men in uniform remains robust and mature. In closing, Madame la Présidente, I reaffirm the Government of Canada's commitment to supporting veterans and their family. More than 90% of the total estimates are delivered as direct payment to veterans, their families, and other program recipients. These investments in Veterans Affairs Canada represent one of the most significant contributions to our government's mission objectives, including being the second largest contributor to meeting the government's NATO spending target. This is not incidental, it is intentional. Notre engagement.
Our commitment is clear. We will always be there, for today and for tomorrow.
Your service matters. Your sacrifice is recognized, and your future remains our responsibility. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. I am now available to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Minister McKnight. It's always a pleasure to have you here. We will open our first round of questions with 6 minutes, and Mr. Richards, 6 minutes for you.
So, Minister, just like when you were before the Finance Committee back in February, this morning you indicated that Veterans Affairs isn't facing cuts. Yet, everybody else in the entire country seems to understand and be well aware that there are cuts happening to veteran services. Massive ones, in fact. And there's a lot of a cloud of uncertainty around them. And you said in your opening remarks that you want to make sure that those services are there without any uncertainty. Well, there is a lot of uncertainty right now because what they're hearing from you and what they're seeing in reality are very different. So let's perhaps just dig into, like, when you were at Finance Committee back in February, about a week later, it was less than a week later, in fact, when the president of the Union of Veterans Affairs Employees came forward and raised the alarm about the cuts that were happening at the Bureau of Pension Advocates. For those that aren't familiar with the Bureau of Pension Advocates, they're the folks that actually help when Veterans Affairs denies someone, help them get the benefits they need. 90% of the time, there's an improvement in terms of the services that veterans get as a result of what's happening at the Bureau, through the Bureau of Pension Advocates at the Veterans Review and Appeal Board. So I guess I sit here and I'm not even sure what to ask you, because, like, you seem to not be in reality here. Like, everyone understands that there is cuts to veterans, including what I just indicated with the Bureau of Pension Advocates. Can you square that circle for me somehow? I don't know how you can sit here and tell us there isn't cuts when everybody else is well aware there's cuts. Like,
So, Madam
Explain it
Chair,
to us.
through you, I would like to correct the record that my colleague is stating something that is inaccurate. There is not a cut to services and benefits for veterans. My colleague has specific.
So you would have the position that the Bureau of Pension Advocates is not a service to veterans?
Madam Chair, my colleague has stated something that I disagree with. The Bureau of Pension Advocates
what exactly
is,
do you disagree with? Do you disagree that there's a cut, or do you disagree that it's a service to veterans?
I would like the member to allow the minister to answer,
I just
please.
needed to clarify
Yeah, I
what-
know,
what she
that's
was
fine, but
saying.
let's allow the
Oh, I
minister
agree-
to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree that the Bureau of Pension Advocates is a service to veterans. We are not cutting the service. The Bureau offers the free legal advice and representation to a veteran pursuing the appeals process. There was temporary funding that was part of Budget 2023, which was sunsetting on March 31st, 2026. At this point, we are now transitioning back to steady state operations, which was prior to the temporary funding of 2023.
Okay, so that sounds to me like the liberal speak, right? I mean, cutting funding, not renewing funding, neglecting programs that maybe sunsetting, they all mean the same thing. They all have the same result on veterans, the same result, that veterans are losing those services. The Association of Justice Council, which represents the BPA, has said about these cuts, this is not just a cut, but a devastating one. A devastating one. They say that this could mean up to 5 years for veterans to wait to get the result that they need. 5 years. So how can you sit there and tell us that this isn't going to impact services to veterans? They're going to wait 5 years to even get a decision. Tell us how that doesn't impact them. It's a major impact. It's a devastating cut. No matter how you want to explain it, that's what it is. Tell us how it's not going to impact veterans when they have to wait 5 years.
So, Madam Chair, we are returning to our steady state operations to continue offering the service to veterans of support with their appeals process. We are also, at the same time, as mentioned with the budget investment of the $184.9 million, we are modernizing our service delivery and reviewing processes so that we can make investments in technology and tools to equip frontline staff to make decisions for veterans. And all of this will enhance the service delivery that we offer across Veterans Affairs Canada, including through the Bureau of Pension Advocates.
So I can only imagine what veterans must be feeling watching this, because I find this incredibly frustrating. Everybody else knows this is a cut, and you're sitting there trying to tell us it's not. It is just shocking. I guess there's not much point continuing down that line, because you're just going to continue to read your talking points, and veterans are going to continue to be frustrated. So let me ask instead, you mentioned it sort of almost in code, but about the Military Honors Review Board in your opening remarks. There's been calls unanimously from this committee, also from the Senate, from various provinces in this country that have called for this Military Honors Review Board. You mentioned that there was going to be a comprehensive response to the petition. You didn't indicate whether that would be a positive response or not. Can you tell us, does the government plan to create the Military Honors Review Board so that heroes like Jess Larochelle and others can finally receive the chance to have a Victoria Cross that they deserve?
So, Madam Chair, honoring the bravery and service and sacrifice of our Canadian Armed Forces is sacred and a deeply held commitment that we will be continuing to move forward with. Military honors are fully considered by the Canadian Armed Forces chain of command and involves a comprehensive and rigorous review.
So no response
Thank
there
you
either.
very much, Mr. Richards. I appreciate. Thank you. Now for 6 minutes, Monsieur Saint-Pierre.
Thank you. Minister, thanks for being here today. Is there anything from the questions that you just received from my colleague that you'd like to clarify while you have a few minutes to answer my questions?
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think I was very clear with regards to the Bureau of Pension Advocates that this was funding that was coming to a sunset, and that we are returning to our steady state operations so that we can continue to make investments in service delivery, which will include through the services delivered through the Bureau of Pension Advocates, and we will continue to offer this free service to veterans to support them in their legal process or in their reviews if they undertake it. Thank you.
Thank you. And can you comment on whether Veteran Affairs Canada's budget fully included in the calculation of the 2% of GDP that was set out by NATO? Can you quickly comment on whether this budget is including that 2% GDP?
Certainly. Over 90% of VAC's total budget does count towards the NATO 2% GDP calculation. As I mentioned in my remarks, that is funding that is delivered directly to veterans as services and benefits to their families, and that does contribute to that 2% calculation.
Great, thank you. And Minister, the comprehensive expenditure review was, I'm sure, an intensive process, and while I don't want to ask you to break confidences, I think Veterans Affairs Committee members would appreciate you knowing the mindset that you took when making decisions on how to advance that review. Can you clarify how many Veteran Affairs Canada programs are being cut?
So the comprehensive expenditure review was a very large project to be undertaking. It was something that took a lot of time and intentionality to ensure that we could maintain all services and benefits for veterans. That is core to our foundation of our mission, the work that we do, and it is front and center in the decisions that we are making. So that was the center point of undertaking that process. As part of that process, while maintaining the benefits and the accessibility of the cannabis for medical purposes benefit, we reduced the rate of reimbursement to align with the market rate, or to better align with the market rate, while still allowing veterans to maintain access to the program, to their daily per gram limit, so that they would not have a change or a cut. There were no cuts made to the benefits and programs for veterans.
Maybe on that line of thinking, were any Veteran Affairs Canada benefits cut?
There has been no cuts to the benefits offered to veterans through Veterans Affairs Canada.
Thank you. And with regards to the caregiver recognition benefits, I think it accounted for a decrease in funding, a 6.5% decrease in funding. Can you comment on that decrease?
As we know, not all veterans have the same experience. Each of them is unique. Each of their needs is unique. And as such, the ebbs and flows within our programs and services will adjust based on the needs of the veterans at a given moment. Specific to that specific program, I have officials with me, and they may be able to add more specifics to the caregiver program if you wish.
Thank you. And I think during your testimony you mentioned the National Monument to Canada's mission in Afghanistan, a wonderful project. Can you comment quickly on the construction schedule, when you plan on undertaking the construction of this new monument? And also, can you comment on the estimated costs for this project?
So this This monument has been many years coming forward, and it is a significant step that we are reaching the sod turning in the coming weeks. I think this is an important step that we are moving forward with, and construction will be commencing as we undertake the sod turning, with completion expected sometime in 2028. I know invitations were extended to the members of the ACFA committee to be at the sod turning, and I hope that everyone will have a chance to join us.
Thank you. We look forward to joining you in the coming weeks. And 1 minute, yes, thank you. Maybe a question on the last post fund, which basically ensures that low-income families can provide proper burial for deceased veterans. The funding fell from around 12 million in 2018-2019 to about 6.7 million in 2026-2027. Curious if in 30 seconds you can quickly comment on this decrease.
Again, as I mentioned, Madam Chair, the needs of veterans at any given point in the cycle of their relationship with Veterans Affairs, veterans will be at their own individual stage. For specifics like that, I would turn to officials that may be able to add more detail.
Thank you.
Pause that for maybe the second hour. Thank you very much. Pour 6 minutes.
For 6 minutes. And for people here, Madame Gaudreau will ask questions in French, so make sure you have your earphone. Madame Gaudreau, you have 6 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you for being with us. It is a privilege to be able to ask questions. My question will be about what happens when veterans come to us, and I think it's the wrong mic that is on. I will start again. I moved. Okay, I will start again. So my questions will be about veterans who come to my office. You won't be surprised that when we talk about veterans, we're talking about Quebec. I was looking at the last numbers for the Quebec Veterans Foundation. Quebec has a big proportion of them, and a majority of them is Francophone. In 24-25, the Fund for Veterans and their Family distributed $14.3 million in the country. Quebec represents almost 23% of the population of veterans, but Quebec organizations only receive 2% of the total funding. So I would like to understand why. Why this discrepancy?
Madam Chair, through you, I would just like to ask a clarification because it may be a translation. You were mentioning about the fund that distributed 14.3 million. Was that the Veteran Family Wellbeing Fund? Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ensure. The Veteran Family Wellbeing Fund is, as you mentioned, a fund that has funds available to support projects that support and focus on veteran well-being and care. We fund activities that include research programs and other things that bring veterans together. There is a robust and rigorous process for receiving and reviewing applications to ensure that they meet the eligibility criteria of the program. As it specifically relates to Quebec organizations, I would turn to my department officials to specify how that is divided between Quebec and the rest of Canada, and they could provide insight on that.
Actually, what I would like to know is what are the criteria? Because if some organizations didn't receive it, they will try again because it's unacceptable to receive only 2% of the total funding. I hear about it every day. So I thank you and I will hear from you. And for you, Madam Minister, this 60% of the funding is given to 30% in Ontario. So even in Manitoba, the proportion is higher than in Quebec. So there is something that needs to be done, and I would like that to be fixed quickly. And now, $3.30 per veteran in Quebec. Is that adequate funding, according to you?
$30 per
Bien, en
veteran
fait, c'est la
refers to.
proportion des sommes octroyées
It's the proportion of the funding that is given to Quebec when it comes to veterans. So I wanted to bring your attention to that. How can we come to $3.30 and offer services, continuous services for our veterans? What would I would stop the clock here. I'm trying to understand. You made your own analysis and you came up with that $3.30. Would the department be able to send us more details when it comes to the amount that each veteran receives? And that includes veterans from Quebec. I'm just a little bit surprised. I don't want to neglect your calculations, but I want to be sure that we have the right numbers in this committee. So maybe you could share with us, Madam Minister, and your team, you could share with us the amount per veteran in Canada. And depending on the services for each veteran, this will differ, but it would be good to have an average. And that would be a good solution for us because there was a number that was mentioned today. So it would clarify things. Absolutely. So there's different clients in each province. And if here we're talking about the Francophone clients. So with those numbers, we will be able to rectify things. So if there is something to correct, what are you planning to do in order to correct this?
I don't have those numbers with me, so I will look to the department to speak to that. We've in the past had conversations about the availability of services to Francophone veterans and ensuring that they have access to services in the language of their choosing. We are a bilingual country, and so whether that is Francophone veterans in Quebec or whether it's Francophone veterans across Canada, we want to ensure that they have access to that service. We, as recently as September, we know that the average turnaround time for a Francophone veteran was slightly better or at least on par with an Anglophone veteran. I think the difference is 0.9 weeks of difference, that Francophone was slightly less. And we know that also 30% of Veterans Affairs employees who are making disability decisions are either French or bilingual to meet the needs of our veterans who choose to have decisions in French or to have communication in French. So again, is there the opportunity to continue enhancing these services? There is always the opportunity to grow and improve. With that said,
je pense qu'on est correct. Merci.
I think I'm good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We will now go to the second round of questions.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, you are also the Associate Minister of National Defence, and I'm sure you're aware of what's been happening with Bill C-11. So the Arbour report, word for word, was in the recommendations, and it is 4 years old. She would not come to committee. And others did testify along with our veterans. And I would really appreciate you coming on record today to indicate Do you support erasing the work of the National Defense Committee and the testimony of the women veterans who contributed to it?
I would just like to clarify, you mentioned about not appearing before committee. Sorry, was that in reference to me or somebody else? No. Okay.
Justice Harbour.
Okay.
But please go ahead quickly.
Thank you for so I stand with continuing to support women veterans in their experiences, ensuring that they are heard, that their unique experiences are represented, and continuing to work with the government to address those needs.
Okay, that answers the question. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. The Department Plan of 2627 states that VAC will keep tracking progress on recommendations from the Invisible No More report by the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs, and also the Women's Veteran Council will continue to share insights and recommendations to help VAC address the unique needs of women veterans. Such a quote. Well, given that 6 of the 12 members have announced they're stepping down, 5 of 8 of those are veterans, and there are 3 of the 6 remaining members who are wonderful. They are Royal Canadian Mounted Police representation. But, with this mass resignation of women from the Veterans Council, and now your government scrapping all of the amendments made to Bill C-11, which were done with input from those same veterans, what do you have to say to those women who've been reaching out over the actions of your government, and how do you actually plan to rely on the work of the Women Veterans Council in the future?
Well, I thank all members of the Women's Veterans Council for their commitment, their contributions to a voluntary advisory council. The insights that they have offered and the impact that they made during the first year was significant. And we are...
I'm sorry, because I hear from many of them, and they have absolutely felt ignored through the course of this year. I now need to share my time with my colleague, Mr. Fraser.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister, for joining us today. You've been in this role for just under a year. In your opening testimony today, you said that your decisions are not incidental, they're intentional. I'd like to ask you about your intentional decisions when it comes to the Canadian Corps of Commissionaires, an 80-year-old contract that employs thousands of veterans, and you've decided to cancel that, but you're going to be renewing the PCVRS contract. Could you please, as my colleague from across the aisle said, give me your mindset and how you came to those decisions?
Thank you for the question. With all government policies, we know that they will evolve as goals change. And our focus is on ensuring that veterans are supported in the employment that best meets their needs, their skills, and where they are today in their experiences.
Thank you. Are you saying to me that those that are employed with the Canadian Corps of Commissionaires are unhappy with their employment?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay,
I'm saying that we are looking to expand the opportunities to meet the needs of veterans.
So explain to me how PCVRS is going to do that. I believe that Canadian Corps of Commissionaires is an awesome organization, and that they've done some yeoman's work here, and I find this very, very unsatisfactory, this decision. And I'd like to know how you came to that decision.
Madam Chair, through you, I think I would like to, I don't agree with the member's assessment of comparing the PCVRS rehabilitation contract and the policy of the first right of refusal with regards to the Corps of Commissionaires.
Sorry, is my time done? Yes, sorry. Okay.
Thank you very much. I apologize, Mr. Tomey. Thank you, Minister. Now for 5 minutes, Mr. D'Entremont.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much.
Answer our questions, and as we try to decipher budgets, as they tend to be complicated, and things can be taken out of context a lot of times, and sometimes there's a little bit of I would say a little bit of feigned controversy sometimes coming from our friends across the way. I want to go back a little bit to the Bureau of Pension Advocates for a minute. I was just wondering on that. Can you clarify what it is and what it isn't, and how the investment on frontline is actually a better way to look at this, that we want to be able to help veterans on the front line so they don't actually have to go to the Bureau of Pension Advocates, is kind of what I understand here.
Certainly, thank you. Thank you for the question. As I've already mentioned, we are making an adjustment back to the steady state operations following the conclusion of the temporary funding. We then have the investment of the $184.9 million over 4 years, which is to invest in service modernization and service delivery. The opportunity that is here is to be working with veterans at the front end of their journey with Veterans Affairs Canada, to support them, to engage with them, to ensure that the process for reviewing disability applications, that we have made the investments there so that ultimately, hopefully veterans don't have to go through the appeals process. We are not looking to reduce the appeals. We're not looking to change that. This is about supporting veterans at the beginning and support them in their process with Veterans Affairs Canada. The Bureau will continue to be available to support veterans, but our hope is that by engaging with them earlier and putting the resources at the beginning, we can support them before needing to get to that point.
And on the other side, I mean, a lot of times when people come to our offices, they're normally at their wits' end. They've had some kind of negative review, or they've run into a problem, that kind of stuff. So we end up hearing probably the worst of the worst as it goes along. What kind of positives do we have in the process? Like, how are things going for real?
Yes. Well, thank you for mentioning that, because I have the opportunity to engage with veterans across the country, as many of our colleagues do. And while things aren't perfect, that's the truth. It's not perfect. What I'm hearing, and as recently as Saturday night, I was engaged with a veteran in my community who said, my process has gone smoother than it previously did. They are finding the engagement is improving. And we honestly discuss that, yes, it could continue to be enhanced, and that is the work we are continuing to do with our investments. But overall, the majority of the conversations are that things are okay. And, you know, they're better than they were. And we will continue to make those investments to support the veterans and to support them in their journey with Veterans Affairs Canada.
And in your discussion, in your opening remarks, you talked about the extra monies that are going into the department. I think it was like a $41 million there. Can you maybe talk about does that mean hiring, or does that mean opening new offices? Where would that investment go?
So we've invested. Of the $184.9 million, right, there is $24 million that has been identified for IT infrastructure to support the processes. For the specifics as to what else that means, I would refer to the department officials to break that down further.
Just changing, because I know I've got about 30 seconds left. When we talk to veterans, you know, we have sort of the Second World War, we have the Korean, we have the more modern vets. Do we treat them all the same, or do we actually, you know, look at them by how they have served our country?
Each veteran's experience is going to be unique, so we can't treat all veterans the same, because each of them is their own experience, and that would be whether we were comparing two veterans that served in the same conflict or whether we're comparing veterans. Each individual veteran needs to be looked at for their own unique experiences and with their needs of where they are today.
Excellent. Thank you.
2 minutes and a half. Just to go back, Madam Chair, I'd like to thank Jonathan Audet, General Manager, the three partners together for a same vision. This is the document they've used to come up with the $3.33, etc. So I'm surprised. I've completely lost the thread of my questions because this is information that I have right here. I'll share this with you. I am a bit surprised, staggered to see that we are falling back on what's going well. We're talking about veterans, people who've served our country, people that we have told we will be there for you until the bitter end. And here we're talking about lives. We've just completed a study on the high rate of suicide and saying that I have many people that are disappointed, frustrated, who've lost trust. There are people who tell us, well, if you think we're going to encourage our children to do what we have done, it's an absolute no. And these people travel and see what's happening outside. It's been a year that you've been in your position, Madam Minister. What I've understood during the question period you have mentioned, there would be an independent investigation to ensure that the PCVRS, it's the PCVRS that before it be renewed, that we at least can ensure that it corrects all its what's missing. So could you commit to undertake this investigation as of now?
Question is if we will undertake a review of the PCVRS program. During my previous appearance, Madam Chair, I did make that commitment of an independent review will be undertaken of the PCVRS. Work has been progressing on that, and we anticipate having more to share in the coming months.
Merci.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Gaudreau.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Minister for being here today. I want to thank them, Madam Gaudreau, for kind of teeing this off for me a little bit. You're a new minister to this role, but we've experienced as opposition members for a number of years how Liberals have fed their friends. We've seen the We Charity scandal. We've seen the Green Slush Fund scandal. We've seen this launch corruption pad scandal over the last number of weeks. And this PCVRS feels similar. It feels similar. It feels like a pump and dump scheme. It feels like the government, your department was managing case files, was doing this kind of thing, probably has the capability to manage all of these case files, and yet kind of attached on the side as an appendage, we got this PCVRS along the way. How does it make you feel that veterans have been used and veteran services have been used to drive up stock prices of particular companies?
Madam Chair, I disagree with my colleagues' assessments. I think there's many pieces there that I don't agree with. The PCVRS program was brought in for a holistic approach to support veterans in their rehabilitation journey.
Would you say that your ministry is not capable of doing that?
Madam Chair, it is important that we look at as many opportunities as possible to meet the needs of veterans in ways that
haven't gone up because of this contract.
Madam Chair, that is outside the scope of my expertise or my focus, and I disagree with this line of questioning.
Mr. Viersen, I'm just going to ask you to please allow the Minister to respond to your question, please.
I think I'm getting adequate response here, Madam Chair. Who will be doing the independent review on PCVRS?
As I mentioned in my answer to our colleague, The work is being undertaken right now to set the scope and the process for the review, and we will be going through appropriate channels to have that review undertaken.
What kind of a organization are you looking for an independent review?
It will be an independent of our department who is conducting the review. No, Madam Chair, it is going to be independent of the department who is conducting the review.
Okay. What are you looking for? What's some criteria that you're looking for in this review? Like what are some assessment metrics that you'll be looking for?
As I said, Madam Chair, we are in the midst of working through the scoping activity right now to define the parameters of the review, and I look forward to sharing more details as we move through.
For sure, but you're the minister. You have understandings of these things. What would you like to see as some of the things that would be captured in the scope of this review?
Madam Chair, both in the study that was undertaken and in the conversations that I have had with veterans, there's a number of experiences that will be considered, including the veterans' experience, including the experience of Veterans Affairs Canada working with the service provider, the experience of the service providers and the affiliates within the service providers. So there are a number of different avenues that we will be looking at.
Will that review be the basis of which you make your decision for whether to renew the contract?
At this point, I am focused on defining the scope of the review so that we can move forward with those steps before we look at the next decision. Right now, it is about how do we get the independent review done and ensuring that veterans have access to continuous care for those that are currently in the rehabilitation journey.
Okay. Will you be asking for a recommendation to renew that contract from this review?
At this moment, it is too early to make a determine that.
So if you don't like the findings of the review, you'll ignore it and make your own decision. Is that what you're saying?
Madam Chair, my colleague is choosing to make assumptions and to put words in my mouth. I am undertaking the steps to define the parameters of the review first.
Thank you very much, Mr. Viersen.
Thank you.
I guess we all have clips and fundraising activity happening here today. Again, Mr. Casey for 5 minutes.
It's a good idea.
Thank you.
I guess I'll formally raise a point of order, Chair. I'll just say this. I don't believe it's the role of the chair to engage in partisan types of comments. I don't believe anyone here was doing that. I believe that the chair was guilty of that, and I hope that you'll choose to apologize to the member for that.
I would just like to make sure that all members of parliament, as they ask a questions, allow the minister and our wonderful guests that have been coming to this committee to answer properly. That's what I will say. On 5 minutes, Mr. Casey.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and welcome, Minister, and your team. Just on the very last line of questions, if there's any element of the questioning during the last 5 minutes that you felt that you were cut off and wanted to be able to explain your answer, this would be a good time to do it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just reinforce that my first and foremost priority is ensuring that our veterans continue to have access to continuous care to support them in their journey. That is fundamental to what we are doing, and that needs to be our number one focus. We are moving forward with the independent review so that we can look at the program and the provision of the program to ensure that it is meeting the needs of veterans.
Mr. Tolmie asked you a series of questions around the right of first refusal, attempting to draw a link with the PCVRS contract. So, for starters, is the right of first refusal Is that a policy or a program?
It is a policy of the government that was established in 1945.
Feel free to elaborate a little bit on the policy change, the justification for the policy change, and when it's to come into effect.
So the policy, as I said, was enacted to support the needs of individuals or soldiers that were returning home from the war in 1945, to connect them with employment and in the Guard services. As today, our veterans, as we've mentioned, cover a wide range of skills. They are highly trained individuals, highly educated individuals, and each of them is in a unique and different experience based on their service, what that has looked like. And we are looking to expand our opportunities for employment for veterans to meet them where they are in their needs, in their availability, and in a career of their choosing that meets what they would like to do. This can include Guard services. It may also include a number of other opportunities. And we will be working to support veterans through the Veteran Employment Strategy, which has been developed as we move forward and implement it, and continue to work with the Corps of Commissionaires to offer opportunities as Guard services for veterans as well. And the time frame for the change is that the policy would be coming to an end in March of 2027.
So just to be clear, when the policy comes to an end in March of 2027, then security services at federal government properties will be open to the market. Is there any reason that they wouldn't be able to bid for those contracts?
It will be an open competitive process, yes, of which the Corps of Commissionaires could choose to submit a bid for one of those. And I would expect or anticipate that the Corps of Commissionaires would have the expertise and the knowledge to be able to submit a competitive bid.
I just want to come back to a comment that was made, I think, in the preamble to a question from Mr. Richards with respect to the Bureau of Pensions Advocates and their Association for Justice Council, talking about the likelihood of a 5-year delay in the processing of appeals through the Veterans Review and Appeal Board. So my question to you, and I expect your officials may be interested in this, but I'll ask you first. Feel free to move it over if you like. Have there been discussions with the association, and does the department share the view of the association that delays of up to 5 years are likely?
I feel the officials would best be the ones to respond to that, so I will let them respond.
Certainly. So thank you so much for the question, Madam Chair. I would certainly highlight a couple of things in this particular regard. First, I'm not a big fan of the hypothetical of a 5-year type of explanation in that regard. In fact, the Department of Veterans Affairs takes the situation very seriously, end to end, from a veterans benefits point of view, including from the time of application through decision. Is that better? Madam?
I'm sorry, you're out of time. Mr. Casey is out of time. I apologize. I should have acknowledged the signals. When I do this, is because you're actually
whether you speak loudly or softly, you're still out of time.
So, Mr. Freeman, on that note, I will have to interrupt you and apologize sincerely. So we do have 5 minutes left for minister's appearance. So I think we'll do 2, 2, and 1 to be fair. So 2 minutes, and Madame Gaudreault, 1 minute. Not sure who's starting on your, I'm sorry, Ms. Wagenthal.
Thank you so much, Chair. Minister, during the Silent No More testimony, I don't know if you've read it or not or listened to it, but a young woman new to the armed forces was gang raped and when she attempted to get help, was basically put in jail for over a week on the base, no communications whatsoever, then escorted to another city, to a hospital to get assistance, and then in the end had to fight very hard to get any care. As a matter of fact, it was the pension advocates that located her files in a place totally not related to where all files should be protected and available. If those pension advocates are losing funding, and we are now going entirely only to a civilian court to have these individuals who face military sexual trauma get assistance and have their cases heard, will the pension advocates have the funding and the support of Veterans Affairs to assist those veterans, because they are there as a tool for the veterans and their support is being clawed back? So are they available? Yeah, just a yes or no, please.
So first, I think it's incredibly important to acknowledge the courage of the individuals that chose to come forward and share their stories.
We have limited time, please.
And
Will the pension advocates be available for those individuals taking their cases to court? Just yes or no?
And Madam Chair, as I've mentioned, the Bureau of Pension Advocates will be continue to be available
Okay, thank
as a
you,
free
Madam Chair.
resource for veterans.
I understand that that is a yes. Thank you. I hope to see that. Can you also just quickly mention, in response to all of the feedback that we got at this committee on spouses and families getting mental health care in their own right, is there funding being set aside for that with this budget, yes or no?
Madam Chair, I look forward to receiving the report from this committee on suicide and to reviewing the recommendations that come forward.
Thank you very much. I do believe for 2 minutes, Mrs. Ertel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister, good morning. As you know, we've been doing an entrepreneurship study for veteran entrepreneurs. So in the time that we have, can you clarify for veterans and our colleagues what the National Veteran Employment Strategy represents and how you're driving to modernize and operationalize this strategy?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. You know, I've had the opportunity to speak about the veteran employment strategy, but also the entrepreneurship study, or the entrepreneurship opportunity for veterans a few times. It is something that I think is tremendously important as we support veterans in connecting with the career of their choosing that meets their needs where they are right now. And of that, veteran entrepreneurship is an opportunity which I think we can continue to work with veterans to explore, to meet their needs. I've had the opportunity to speak with a few veteran entrepreneurs now who have shared the positive impacts that entrepreneurship has had for them in terms of being able to adapt to their needs, give them the flexibility. In some cases, it has allowed them to continue to serve in a reserve capacity while growing their business, which has been a tremendous example. And I know that this is something that this committee has been studying as well, and that a report will be forthcoming with recommendations, and I look forward to reading that as we continue to build out as we move forward and build out the entrepreneurship or the strategy to meet and work with veterans.
Thank you. And very quickly, is this relevant to the work that you're going to be doing over the next 12 months?
Yes, it is incredibly relevant to the work that is being undertaken right now, and I look forward to sharing more updates.
Thank you very much. Pour la dernière minute, Madame Gaudreau.
Thank you for the last minute, Madame Gaudreau. A very simple question. A lot of veterans are wondering about the interest and the level of engagement towards veterans by the Prime Minister. Can you tell us what it is?
To look and to make investments in protecting Canada and investing in our security and our sovereignty. And the veterans are a key component of that, as the individuals that have served this country, who have stood up for Canada, who have defended our sovereignty, and we will continue to move forward with recognition of the modern-day veteran and the contributions that they have made to Canada.
Sur ce, Ça conclut.
Well, this concludes the first hour with the Minister McKnight.
Very much for joining us. I will suspend and then we'll go into the second hour. Merci. Bonjour à tous encore. Écoutez, pour la deuxième heure de la réunion, nous
Welcome to
sommes...
this second hour of the meeting. We're joined by the following witnesses from the Department of Veterans Affairs, Pierre Tessier, ADM, Chief Financial Officer and Corporate Services.
Par intérim, prestation des services. And Mr.
Jane Hicks, Acting Senior Deputy Minister, Service Delivery.
Des politiques stratégiques de la planification.
And Mitch Freeman, Acting Assistant Deputy Minister, Strategic Policy Planning and Performance Branch. So, we're going to be resuming the round of question and answers with committee members. I will ask Mr. Richards. You have 6 minutes.
All right, Chair. We continue to struggle here because veterans across this country and almost everybody else seems to be well aware there's cuts. You know, a number of different areas where there's cuts being faced. And yet we have the minister continue to sit here and tell us that there isn't cuts. So there's clearly a need for this committee to do a study on the budget cuts. So I move the following, and it's been on notice since February the 19th, that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs undertake a study of 10 meetings to study the effects of the federal budget cuts proposed in Budget 2025 as it relates to veterans services. That as part of this study, the committee examined the proposed changes in legislative definitions related to long-term care, the proposed cuts to medical cannabis reimbursement, the recent layoffs from the Bureau of Pension Advocates, RCMP pension changes, and any other related topics. And that for this study, the witnesses include, but are not limited to, A, the Minister of Veterans Affairs, B, the Parliamentary Budget Officer, C, the Veterans Ombudsman, D, the Royal Canadian Legion and other veteran organizations, E, veterans, and F, veterans service providers. That the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House, and that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee request a government response to the report. So I'm moving this, obviously in response to what we've heard here from the minister, but also because there's a need for this study to happen. If in fact what the minister is telling us is true, I see no reason why the government would have any trouble supporting such a motion so that it can be cleared up, because there's certainly a lot of doubt out there if we want to even just put it nicely about what is happening. So, I won't get into a whole lot of detail about the motion because I'd like to see it pass, and we can then use the time to question the officials. But should the for anyone that's watching today, as I've already said, should this be something that the government has nothing to hide, they should have no trouble supporting this motion. And if they do have something to hide, well, you may see attempts to adjourn debate. You may see filibuster. Who knows? It's very clear to everyone in Canada that they're soon to have a majority at committees based on what they're doing right now, they may want to avoid having scrutiny on these cuts. But should they have nothing to hide, I would think they would have no trouble supporting this. So I move that motion, and I hope that we can get support for it, that we can have a study. I mean, we're talking about 10 meetings, which I know is lengthy, but it's also talking about 5 different areas of cuts. That's a couple of meetings per cut. I don't think that's too much to ask. I will move the motion, and I hope we can pass it.
Thank you very much. I'll
Point
suspend.
of order, Madam Chair. Just on a
yes.
point of order. Is this motion exactly the one that was put on notice back in February? Is it? Okay. Okay, thank you.
Perfect. I will suspend so we can look at the motion. Thank you very much. would like to give Mr. Casey the chance to respond.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All right. We have a motion here that was put on notice on February 18th, 2026. It's probably a bit surprising that the motion was only brought forward 2 months later. Budget 2025 has been passed. The budget implementation bill has been passed. And now, at a time when we are in the process of changing the composition of committees, now this is being brought forward. I think we need to be clear that this is a maneuver, this is a strategy. I can say that I've had conversations with representatives of the Bloc Québécois who indicated that 10 meetings is probably too much. So I imagine that there will be an amendment brought to this motion. We'll see. I will let Ms. Gaudreau intervene and speak for herself.
We are debating a motion that was put on notice on February 19th, 2026, after the Budget 2025 has been adopted by the House, after the Budget Implementation Act has been adopted by the House, and on the eve of what is likely to be a change in the composition of standing committees, so that, to use the Prime Minister's words, there will be less showboating. And I think that's a very good word. So we are in a situation where the motion indicates that there's some misunderstanding or some refusal to accept the testimony that has been, the uncontradicted testimony that has been given today and before every other meeting where these topics have been raised. And this is not unusual. It's not unusual that there is a refusal to accept messages that the official opposition don't like. And so we have a suggestion here to tie up 5 full weeks to study the effects of the federal budget cuts proposed in Budget 2025. The uncontroverted testimony that we have heard before the committee is that there are none, yet the motion suggests, states as a fact, asserts as a fact, that there are cuts proposed as it relates to veteran services. I don't think that the minister could have been any more clear. And if the officials weren't cut off from being allowed to give their more detailed, more technical, more specific testimony on these topics, I have little doubt that the minister's message would have been reinforced. You see, she does talk to them, and they brief her. And so it's a fair bet that what you heard from the minister was consistent with the advice that she received and consistent with the advice that we would receive if we afforded the officials an opportunity to testify. But alas, time is running short on the condonation, the acceptance, the allowance of showboating. And because time is running short, this very much is a last gasp. And so here we are. the motion indicates that we're going to talk about the proposed changes to legislative definitions related to long-term care. Well, those changes are no longer proposed. They're now in policy. We're going to talk about the proposed cuts to medical cannabis reimbursement. And this is another one where there seems to be an abject refusal to accept the unanimous advice in the public domain with respect to medical cannabis reimbursement. And it's been mischaracterized repeatedly, as is the case with so many things, as a cut. So medical cannabis reimbursement is a matter of aligning the reimbursement price for medical cannabis to the market rate. And that's to take it from $8.50 down to $6. This shows up because of generally accepted accounting principles, because of actuarial calculations, and because of net present value. This shows up in the budget documents as a $4.2 million reduction in expenditure. So let's be clear on 4.2 billion, billion with a B. So let's be very clear on what that calculation means. The medical cannabis system within Veterans Affairs is like so many other in Veterans Affairs. These are statutory rights that veterans have where there really isn't a discretion. If the application meets the law and meets the policy, they have a right to the service, a right to the product. And that is the case with respect to medical cannabis. So the way the $4.2 billion shows up on the books is the present value of the future obligation of the Government of Canada with respect to medical cannabis. So if you take the amount of money that would be paid out for medical cannabis over the next 30 years and bring it back to today's rate, and when I talk about that, I'm talking about the $2.50 reduction from $8.50 down to $6. You take it back to today's date, the net present value of that future obligation is $4.2 billion. This has been explained over and over and over again. In committee, on the floor of the House of Commons, through the witnesses we have before this committee. This is simply accrual accounting. This is an actuarial calculation.
I'm just seeking some clarification if this is in fact a filibuster to just avoid being accountable to veterans. Are they denying that there's cuts? Is this just a filibuster so they can avoid accountability?
Mr. Richards, I think your point, that's not a point of order. You're going into a debate yourself. Mr. Casey has the floor, so I will allow Mr. Casey to speak, and we have to listen. Thank you.
All right. I guess I'm not sure whether my colleague was bored or convinced with the representation on medical cannabis, but we can move on. The next part of the motion talks about the recent layoffs from the Bureau of Pensions Advocates. Now, how we could bring a motion today after hearing uncontroverted evidence from the only witness we heard today that there have been no layoffs, that there was a provision in Budget 2023 with respect to additional staffing for the Bureau of Pensions Advocates, essentially to deal with the backlog that was of a fixed duration and that we've arrived at that date and we are now reverting back to the state of steady operations. It's quite unfortunate, actually, that we didn't, that Mr. Freeman didn't get a chance to complete his answer with respect to the allegations coming from the Society for Justice Advocates, or the group that represents the Bureau of Pensions Advocates. So it's unfortunate that he didn't get the chance to answer that question when I posed it to him, because we ran out of time, and that's my fault probably for not managing the time appropriately, but foolishly thinking that maybe the rest of the committee wanted to hear from the witnesses instead of showboating. In any event, they didn't. So what we're left with is the only testimony before the committee on this is that there have been no layoffs, and we haven't been given the opportunity because of the timing of this motion. I understand the urgency. The chance to be able to pull stunts like this it appears that the window is closing. So all of this is to say that, Madam Chair, I'm going to cede the floor now. All of this is to say that I look forward to hearing the amendment, if it is forthcoming, from the Bloc Québécois and from others to hear the views of others with respect to this this maneuver. And thank you for the time, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casey. I do have a little bit of a list. I know Mrs. Hurtle, you had asked to speak, and Madame Gaudreau, vous avez demandé de parler, Monsieur d'Entremont. So I'm going to pass the floor to Mrs. Hurtle, and après Madame Gaudreau.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would echo my colleague MP Casey's comments regarding the timing being suspect of this motion. The motion was put on notice in February, so I do wonder what has taken so long. Why are we just now hearing it? It is strange to say. I am disappointed that we've shown such disrespect to the officials who would have prepared for this meeting and came expecting to be able to share information. And now we have lost that opportunity with them, and hard to say when they'll come back again.
Just on a point of order, Chair, we certainly could have heard from officials. Liberals could have just simply voted on the motion. They seem to be trying to hide from accountability
again,
here
that's
rather than
not a point
voting
of
on the
order.
motion.
Thank you very much.
Returning to, well, no,
I
because we're
would
pointing out
really
the,
like
we're
to
pointing out,
allow
Chair,
Mrs. Hurtle, please.
But the officials could have been heard from had you not
Please.
dismissed them and had your colleagues not
Please,
filibustered.
people, I think we all realize, so I'll stay objective. Mrs. Hurtle, continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, it is unfortunate that we will not get to hear the responses and more detailed information from the officials who did come prepared to answer our questions today. I would also say that as I'm new to the Hill, this is all very unusual to me, and I'm wondering that if this is the norm, I would hope that we would work collaboratively to advance the needs and the well-being of veterans in our community, because is that not why we are all here, is to move things forward and do better for the veterans, as we've all agreed that we wish to do. I'm here to hear about priorities for veterans and where their needs are and how we can better work together. To that end, I presented a motion. The second reading was last week in the chamber, which relates to surplus federal properties across the country and how we can better use those to aid our veterans. And it did very happily pass second reading, so it's now going to go to committee, where we'll hopefully come up with a list and a process for moving these properties
Rappel au règlement, Madame la
along.
Présidente, parce qu'il reste pas
Point of order, Chair. There's not a lot of time left, and I'm just trying to see the relation here. A point of order is generally intended to figure out if there is really a relationship between what's being said and the motion. I mean, I know we're running out of time, so I just want to try.
I will revert to my next point then. The GAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, which Mr. Casey had mentioned. This is a normal procedure for this kind of practice, and I do wonder, there's indignation right now regarding this from our colleagues around the way that the cannabis reduction in price per ounce of cannabis is being handled. This is normal practice, normal accounting practice, and I would question how many times our colleagues who were in government between 2009 and 2015 voted in favor of any of these methods on other bills. So that's good for me. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Madame Gaudreau.
Ms. Gaudreau. Thank you, Chair. Well, I think that the bells will be ringing in a minute or two, but I just wanted to say for people, well, I guess I would just say that it's important to highlight procedure in this case. We're supposed to be talking about the notice of motion here. Sometimes it's difficult because people want to stretch the time out, and, for the newer members who haven't been here for many years, really our objective here is to study bills, to hold the government accountable, and that's why it is important to study the budget cuts. That said, Madam Chair, I would move an amendment to this notice of motion to refer to 5 meetings. I know we have other things on our plate coming up, so I would just modify the motion to say 5 meetings instead of 10. So Ms. Gaudreau is requesting to amend the motion. Mr. Casey?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Merci, Madame Gaudreau.
And thank you, Ms. Gaudreau. I was anticipating such an amendment. I think that's an improvement because otherwise we would have spent 5 weeks of our time on a subject that was raised for purely partisan objectives. And there is no evidence in the testimony that we heard that this is necessary. So I think cutting the time in half is an improvement. At least we won't lose as much time.
Madame Gaudreau's amendment, which is aligned with the discussions that we had to reduce the number of meetings to be dedicated to this study that was put on notice back in February before the adoption of the Budget Implementation Act, before the passage of the budget, and before all of the testimony that we have heard since, including today, the uncontradicted testimony coming from the minister with respect to the existence of the cuts that are the subject of this motion that is now proposed to be 5 meetings instead of 10. I mean, if we look at the witnesses that will be invited in the event that this motion passes, if we look at the
point of order, Chair, I just wanted to see if we can get unanimous consent to sit through the bells for a period of time.
We have unanimous consent to go through, so we will.
Are the bells ringing?
Yeah, okay. Sorry, Mr. Casey, I apologize. So I didn't want to interrupt you. So we could have a possibility of 15 minutes to have unanimous consent to continue to the bell. It's up to the member. I'm at the will of the committee. So we'll
point out there was Liberals that said no.
No, that's okay. So I will. I suspend. I will. Is there a will of the committee to adjourn? To suspend. We will suspend.